All right, welcome to the public, to the Waunakee Community School District Co-Curricular Committee. I'd like to call this Co-Curricular Committee to order. Everyone is in attendance this morning from the board and the administration. If the agenda looks okay, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? So,
Okay.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, no public comments today, and we'll just move right into going to our activities director, Erin May, give us an update on the fall 2022 program.
Yeah, so on that document, you can see our participation report for our fall sports plus one act. Those are basically our category A activities in the fall at the high school. You can see participation overall over the past 4 years is relatively consistent with 2020 being that kind of odd year because some of the fall sports weren't actually played in the fall. They were played in sort of this March-April timeframe. But you can see the numbers are fairly consistent over the years there. Scrolling down, you'll see middle school, the middle school athletic numbers. Again, we've seen an increase, a pretty big increase, 22 kids from last year to this year in football, where we actually didn't have enough helmets. We basically borrowed some from McFarland football program for our kids to use. So if it came to a 7th grade football, you would all of a sudden see kids with blue helmets out there. We have put in an order with Rydell already for next year to hopefully have enough for our middle school program. We had a pretty, if you look at the numbers, cross country, the only other notable number there, we did have about a 20-person drop off from last year to this year in middle school cross country. Not sure what to attribute that to. We did have a head coach change, but all the other coaches were this, but that person was a coach on the team last year and all the other coaches were the same. So.
It's like they shifted to football.
Football and volleyball. It's like,
Yeah, potentially. High school GPAs. This is based off of first quarter because of course second quarter semester grades aren't finalized yet. So it's not a 100% always accurate. Those things change, but when I calculated this and ran the report, you can see our GPAs of our athletes are strong. And then actually, if you look down on the next one, the cross country girls team was received team recognition. We should be getting a little certificate information about that. The varsity girls team all-state, academic all-state, they're the varsity runners, those 7 girls, their average GPA was a 4.03, so it's a pretty crazy number there. But you can see we had some academic all-state honorees and some athletic all-state honorees this fall. Other sports, this is kind of based off the Coaches Association. So sports like soccer, they wait until the end of the year after the girl season before they name anybody, which is kind of unfortunate because if you're a senior boys soccer player, you don't find out until after, I mean, basically almost a year after you've played your season. So, and it happens, and then they send you the info in the fall. So like this fall, we were like trying to get a hold of our graduating seniors, both from the boys and the girls team, to give them their certificates and things like that. So
they don't even vote for that until, or do they vote and just keep it secret until?
I'm not sure when the voting actually happens, but it doesn't get publicized or released until after the girl season. It's kind of unfortunate that way. And then you can just kind of look, I just did the gross ticket dollars that came through. Those dollars, of course, those include WI playoff games, and those WI playoff games, a certain percentage has to get goes back to the WIA. The percentage differs on the sport, but basically, just in general, just a note on the WIA, the football playoffs, basketball playoffs, and the wrestling playoffs pay for everything the WIA does. Those are their only revenues. Those are their only revenue generating playoffs. Everything else is operated at a loss. So everything that they have to pay for, from renting the rest center for the girls tournaments to buying the trophies to paying their salaries is all covered from those 4 sports. So, not so when you look at these numbers, these are just the gross ticket sales. Not all of that stayed with us. That just gives you an idea of where we're at in terms of attendance and just an idea of how much money's kind of coming in and out of the fall sports gate receipts.
Is that pretty consistent with what we've seen?
Yeah, the fluctuation. And I don't think it would shock anybody is, football is our number 1 attended sport. This year we only had 4 regular season home games. So when we have that, because it's a 9-game season, so you have a 5-game home game season, it goes up a little bit, about 1,000 to 2,000, depending on what it is. We played Middleton twice, which really helped with the number of ticket sales. We did we rented extra bleachers for the playoffs this year. We definitely needed those for the Middleton game. Because it was the one earlier in the year, it was standing room only and it was a crowd control issue. So getting those extra bleachers in and having places for those people to sit in terms of our crowd control really helped. So that's kind of the fall sports academic and participation on it.
Questions, Aaron?
I don't have any.
No, I don't.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
I think one of the things that we'll be looking at, and when you look at just facilities pieces that will impact fall, is that when you talked about bleachers, that'll be a piece we're working on trying to get in place. So that'll be a nice amenity to kind of add to that space there. And then we're gonna have to figure out kind of how we're gonna do that. So that'll be kind of a facilities piece, and part of what Brian and your team will have to look at is one of the things we want to do is obviously get that band off the track. 1, it's not good for the track, and 2, it's not the greatest experience for those kids. And then also see how we can then organize that along with kind of the additional seating.
So the track's being resurfaced this summer.
That's what we're working on. Yeah, that's what Steve's working on with our engineers. There's some timing things that are tight, but we're trying to get it done.
All right, let's move on to coaches' meetings and evaluations.
I asked Brian to be here just to talk a little bit about that. So you want to come up here, Brian, you can speak from here. I think Brian, hey, for what your question was, is just with regards to kind of an update on where we were with that process. So I asked Brian to speak to it because I know you've been working with it.
That's all right. Thanks for warming up the stairs.
They get a little confusing right now.
Didn't know he was behind me. Good morning. And so I guess, a brief update is that all of the fall head coaches have had evaluations completed. There is one coach that the meeting is still to be scheduled. But the rest, the instruments themselves have been completed. The meetings have been up.
We do that meeting on Tuesday.
And they do a evaluation in person. So written first and then.
Yeah, so Aaron, I'll let you speak to that. So
So the meeting, we do the write up the district tool and sat down like with this coach on Tuesday. We we're able to sit down and we went over their evaluation. They had a chance to respond if they had any issues with my evaluation, and we discussed the upcoming season and any potential changes.
Nothing of note came out of them.
I mean, I would say, on a global level, the fall coach evaluations, they're positive. There's, I think, we believe in growth. So there's certainly areas that everyone had that they would either self-identified that they wanted to improve, or we said, we'd like to see improvement, but overall, very positive. There are there are 2 fall coaches that have indicated that they're not going to return. I know one for sure, and one I think is considering whether they're going to be able to do it within their family commitments. But again, those evaluations were still completed and obviously that feedback plays into what they're hopefully working on next year.
Any other questions? All right, so third agenda item is regarding strength and conditioning coordinators, and this is sort of a forecasting of what we may be looking at here.
Yeah, this isn't a recommendation. This is something that I think, Aaron, you've been taking a look at. We've had some conversations with Brian Kowarski and others, and I think Katie, that fits into the meeting that we had with Pat and Chris here just a week or so ago. So I just think Aaron's kind of got a vision for what he sees as some needs that we have, and we wanted to put it on here so that you could at least hear what it is, and then we can figure out if it's something that fits with us now, or certainly something that we have to consider in the future.
Yeah, so if you look at the proposal, Waunakee is actually kind of a rarity for a school our size and not actually have a paid strength and conditioning position. And, you know, whether it's Coach Rice or whoever else has kind of been occupying that PE position, they've taken it on themselves. And we've had a pretty long history and a strong history within the PE department, the coaching staff, having an all-school, all-sport program, a general preparedness program. And that's been dictated or created by Pat and implemented there in his strength 1 and strength 2 classes, and then just by the existence of the sheer numbers of football players, it's been implemented with most of the male population. And then we've over the last 10 years or so been getting more and more females in. We've really been pushing it with the coaches that this is an all school, all strength program. It's been vetted by UW strength coaches. You know, for those of you not familiar, Pat's brother Todd is a college strength coach. Now is doing that in the private sector after doing decades in the college and professional sports. So that program works for everybody, but with Pat being just intimately aligned with the football program, the perception is it's a football program or it's a football specific program, when that's not what it is. So when we had that Title IX review, one of the things we talked about was how do we make sure that that space, not only in actuality is welcoming and is inclusive of all our athletes, male and female. And we talked about how we have female only lifting hours, and we're hiring some more, hiring some female lifting supervisors and things like that. But I think also moving to having a position, a strength coordinator, strength and conditioning position that's separate from, or not necessarily tied to a specific sport, will go a long way in terms of that Title IX perception or that perception. But also when you're looking at the number of athletes and students we're pushing through that building, 7 a.m. this morning, the middle school and the high school weight rooms are being supervised. And then the high school weight room is used every hour during the day for strength classes. And then at 3:45, there's the out of season. And then 4:45, 5 o'clock, there'll be some in-season teams that go up there and lift. So it is something that's being used 11 to 12 hours every day. And it's full. And so to have someone do this, to work intimately with, whether it's the PE teachers that are doing the strength 1 and 2 classes, plus helping develop those out of season programs and then specific in-season programs, because some of our coaches, feel much more comfortable coaching the game than they do necessarily being up in the weight room coaching those techniques. And so having these positions would definitely be beneficial for them. I see it as a 9-month position. We'd still keep our summer school strength training as kind of the PE strength training system that way. You would have a head strength and conditioning position. You can see the job descriptions there. I put in an assistant position. I see that person much more. While they're assisting the head, they're more looking and overseeing the middle school level. In terms of kind of where I pulled those dollar amounts, what I basically did is I looked at, okay, what is a cross country at an assistant coach stipend? And that's like, the head coach is like, starts at like 9%. Okay, so if you were a cross-country coach for over the course of 3 seasons or 9 months, that's where I pulled those numbers from, those percentages. So it's the idea is you're kind of like, you're basically a sport head coach, but for all 3 seasons, fall, winter, spring. And the same with the assistant position, where you're a sport head coach or a sport assistant coach for 3 seasons of a school year.
I think that fits into, Katie, the conversation that you and I had with a number of us, with some of the coaches wanted to come together and had spoken to Katie on the side. And I think one of our limiting factors with strength and conditioning is the space. Is like how large the weight room is, what areas that we have to expand into, which right now are very limited. But it's the concept of starting to think about when we move to the larger high school campus with the middle school, how can we utilize space differently to incorporate larger spaces for things like strength and conditioning. Even as we plan for new schools, like the new middle school plan right now, what we have in the program is an area similar. If you've been to the intermediate school, there's that large cardio room. That's the size of space that we've designated for this at that school. Now, what's going to go into it, we'll work with our staff on to figure out, is it more of a cardio room, a weight room, but we'll work on some of those things. So that's some things we have to keep in mind that also fit into this. Anything with regards to middle school and middle school athletics and middle school co-curriculars, those are all things that we have in our Fund 80 Community Service Fund, because we do allow all the private school, homeschool kids to also participate in that. So that's a Fund 80 program. So any aspect of that could be funded through Fund 80, I believe. So those are some things to think about as kind of the proposal that Aaron's putting forward, particularly as a coordinator, then an assistant, and particularly if one of them was focused on middle school, there would be an opportunity to kind of shift some of those dollars to a different type of fund that doesn't impact the other parts of our plan.
So I suppose as being the coordinator there, if a program already has something in place, they're really gonna look to not change that program necessarily, or, I'm trying to say, is this person going to be the head of, this is what you guys are going to be doing, as well as you're talking, working with the FIAD, there's a lot of students that do outside training stuff too, and how does that all get coordinated in with this? Just thoughts.
So yes, they would work hand in hand with the head coaches if there's specific stuff like, Micah wants his pitchers doing specific things for their rotator cuffs, strength and stability, stuff like that would get worked in. This person, whoever this person would be, I would not expect them to come in and just scrap what we've been doing for the last 25 years. Like that, I think that would be a big misstep for them. But yeah, they would be working hand in hand with those coaches, and then coaches that haven't really pushed it have someone they can rely on to help them with getting those in-season lifts in and things like that. So no, we wouldn't just be like throwing everything out and starting from new.
Is your vision, Aaron, that this would also incorporate some of the scheduling of how you'd utilize that space, or would that still be something that you would envision it'd still be out of kind of like your office?
So the strength, the head coach or the head position assistant, they would coordinate scheduling of the facility space for outside of the school day, and then also scheduling supervision. So it's not necessarily just them there every day, but because we still have that paid position too, where we do have some supervision. So they'd be responsible for scheduling the space and scheduling supervision.
Weight room is always supervised.
Yep.
If it's open, it's supervised.
You had mentioned in the beginning that we're an anomaly and that we don't currently have a strength and conditioning coach coordinator compared to our peers. Do you know what the best practices are? What our peers are doing in terms of that position?
Yeah, so I reached out to a few, I'm just trying to see if I have it in my files real quick. But I reached out to other ADs to find out what they're doing. And like I said, most have a separate paid position. Now, some of them we'll split it up, like they'll have a strength and conditioning coordinator for the fall, for the winter, for the spring. I think that's my opinion, that's disjointed. You need to have one person kind of overseeing all of it and being the point person for it. We have other schools that will simply pay like Brian Bott and have them come and have his assistant coaches just come in and run their after school strength coordinating position. The prices I've heard on that process are pretty high. You're looking at like 25 to 35,000 a year for that. But yeah, I sent out just like a Google survey to some of the ADs in Dane County to find out what they're doing. And I can see if I can find the actual results of that. But yeah, I could share with what others, but yeah, in most cases, schools our size have a coordinator position that's responsible for developing in and out of season programs and then scheduling the use of that facility.
I think if, as we have, I don't know how many students are going through the weight room on a daily basis, but I would imagine there's, I don't know, 500 to 700 kids, depending upon the time of the year or whatever. I think there's definitely a need for that. And with our goals of connecting and engaging with kids, I think the best thing for the students and the student athletes is to ensure that we're managing our facilities and their programming appropriately and in their best interest to keep them here at our school. So, and while I think we've done a phenomenal job with engaging the students up to this point, I think we've maximized we've done the best that we can with the facilities that we have, and to hire somebody to focus on that, I think is good. And like Randy said, I think there's definitely need to continue to look at opportunities to grow that space. We've got that many kids involved. That's where we want them to be with life skills, strength and conditioning. It's not just the athletes, I don't think.
No, it's not. No.
It's
I think it's a piece that we have to look at when you start to look at kind of facility needs across the district. There's definitely needs. There's things that have taken precedent over this, but there's also limited places to move it. So it's not like there's a space that's just waiting for us to move and expand the weight training areas to. We don't have that. So that you have to now look at what's our opportunity to do that. And that's really when we start to transition to that middle school. There's already a lot of conversations that Brian's been part of as far as how do we utilize that space. It's absolutely going to get used. It's just a matter of how are we going to use it with students, which programs are we going to put there. So kind of the concept of the middle school not being utilized at that transition point, that's a non-issue. It's just a matter of how are we going to do it. And some of the pieces that Steve Summers and I've talked about is as we get to the end of our referendum dollars for the cycle we're in right now, will there be dollars available that we can then do some things at that middle school that will help with that transition, at least in the initial years? Because we know that there will be a subsequent ask of our community to then look at as our growth continues, and then how do we really make that more of a stronger campus environment. But that's not the question that was posed this fall. But there may be opportunities to at least help that transition. And this might be one of the areas that we look at. So,
And I just found the forms. In Madison School District, each building has strength and conditioning position plus assistants to help with the supervision. With it, Middleton has 2 strength and conditioning coordinator coaches, along with assistants to help with the individual programs as needed. Milton has a strength and coordinator position. They pay approximately $14,000 a year for. Winona Grove also has a strength and coordinator position similar to ours. Skipping through some of the ones that are our size. Sun Prairie, 2 strength and conditioning coordinators. Watertown they do a different one each season. So some of the schools in the Badger, some of the big 8 schools that responded, I'll have one or potentially two positions, paid positions like this.
Yeah, the other big thing about this is liability. and stuff like for the kids that are doing cleans and hang and stuff like that, that are, 14, 15, 16, 17, and their bodies are changing and stuff like that. Those are moves that need to be somebody that's nationally certified strength and conditioning specialist, not just CPR and stuff, and not just a former athlete or a coach. It's got to be somebody that oversees and knows this stuff and can oversee their staff and to be able to teach and instruct these kids to be able to do these things
Well,
safely.
I think up to this point, we do have people that in there that know what they're doing and they are supervising the kids, and it's just the amount of kids that are up there.
Yeah, as the district grows, just the volume of, the volume of students is becoming difficult to manage, it's been sort of Coach Rice's maniacal desire to win that he first started this back, first started putting this in back in the early 90s. And then, pushing it to all the other coaches because he wants to see all the sportsmen and getting as many kids in there, in that room as possible. So, but it's getting to that point where even that's not necessarily feasible for him to be doing that too.
And for the districts that have those positions, are those traditionally staff people who've taken that on as an additional stipend, or has that been something that it's somebody from the outside with and then if it's a staff person, someone with that training, or kind of what do you see as kind of the staffing model for it?
I think it's hard to say, like, because I've talked to multiple different ADs, and it's a mix. It's a mix of having whether it's a coach, whether it's a wrestling coach, a basketball coach who's just interested in fitness, interested in lifting, that then goes and gets whether it's a CSCS certification or some other type of similar certification, a BFS certification. That, to Brian's point, is that at least I've had some sort of book and practical training on how to put together exercise plan and how to teach the list properly. And other places where they bring in an outside person who, maybe is doing personal training, is working at a facility like Brian Bott's facility, or like a Fortified Fitness, and is just coming in almost as like a private contractor type of thing, where we're going to sign a private contract with you and do it that way. Stoughton has, and it might be different now, but when I had a conversation with their previous athletic director, he was a private individual, and they paid him the strength and conditioning stipend, and he would show up at about 3 o'clock every afternoon, and then he would run the weight room during that time. During the school day, it was the PE department. So those weren't connected, and he was just someone that AD knew through the UW and brought them in. I don't know what certifications they had there, but I would say you see a combination of the two.
Yeah, I mean, it does cover, I was CSCS certified for 20 years, so but that went along with my other degree, and at some point we had to go to a cross fitness professional to work with our college athletes because our facilities weren't big enough and their facilities were, so our athletes were going to them. But I agree, there's some mix, but it's those people who are CSCS certified are looking at not just programming, lifting techniques and stuff like that. It's basically, is the weight room safe enough? Is there enough space? Is there enough to do this safely for the number of people that are in it at the time and stuff? And of course, with budgets and stuff like that as well. So, I would encourage that this moves forward in the future, that you do look for somebody that's nationally certified to really sort of oversee the whole program. And then those coaches, do work with each individual, because this cross-country coach has different lifting techniques than the football coach and basketball coach, and the baseball coach don't have the same. So they work hand in hand with those people. So,
and maybe Brian, this, do we have anybody on staff has some of those certifications?
Mike Victor was working
We have one person that we're of this carries a national certification.
So. Good. Sure, this will be moving forward. Our last item is, I'm sorry, any other questions?
Well, what's the time frame for that, do we think? I mean, is that driven by us? Is it driven by? I mean, is it driven by our committee or is it
I
driven?
mean, if it's something that the committee wants us to further explore and kind of forward on. Then you can direct us to kind of make sure that we investigate that and look at what our options are for this next budget cycle. It's going to be then have to fall into kind of our priority list, and we'll bring that forward. I mean, certainly there's definitely some needs here, Katie. So if it's something that you'd like us to see and vet out for us, we can do that.
Is this something that coaches are aware of that's being looked at, and are they on board? Are there some, like, what's the feeling from that?
I've gotten positive feedback. I haven't talked to them, polled every coach, but yeah, I've received positive feedback both from the current coaches that are kind of shouldering the load right now, and some of our other coaches that would appreciate the idea that, you know, moving away from it just being run by the quote football guys and getting away from that perception would help them in their when they're trying to get their kids lifting and getting their kids to take that area seriously.
I wouldn't worry so much about what the coaching perception are. This is actually more of a somebody who's certified in that will work with their coaches. They won't try to force strong arm one program over another. It's working together. But I mean, it really is a safety issue, and it's a beneficial to the students to do things correctly and look at our programs neutral and have a neutral, like you said, somebody who comes in for all sports, all genders, whatever it may be, and look at the program. And that's that situation. I wouldn't let coaches be able to dictate whether this moves forward or not. It's more of a district.
No, it impacts them. I just wondered what their impressions are, if they know that it's being looked at, and just to get their general.
Well, and that could be kind of our next piece from this committee, is for us to kind of vet that out with them and then bring some of those pieces back. And then it's also a part that we can consider what our options are as we look at the budget cycle. That's the thing. I mean, it seems like the committee's amenable to
Yes.
that position. At least we can look at it.
Okay.
There's going to be a lot of polls on the budget piece, but there's definitely there's a need for some of the things that we're talking about here. Definitely. I mean, you looked at over break. I mean, Brian, you were coaching down in the weight room at the middle school was full for many of those times. And summer, it's just overflowing. So, and I realize this isn't part of the summer program, but all those kids are also engaged. They're trying to be engaged with things during the school year. So it's definitely driven by our athletes, but I would state that when you look at, particularly as the kids who are getting engaged, and if we find more opportunities, you're going to get more kids that are non-athletes going to be in there too, because that's what your FIAD classes are for. So good. We'll follow up with it, and I'll bring some reports back here as we kind of meet after the winter season. Yes.
All right, moving on to the last agenda, get an update on the Booster Club Title IX.
Yeah, Title IX stuff. Let me just kind of speak real kind of high level about this. We've addressed when we received the report from Janice Dolashall on the Title IX audit. I mean, one of the things that we wanted to do was address those things that we could move forward right away. So in the budget for the current year, we've moved a lot of those ticket sales that we've talked about are moved into helping to support some of those items like the uniform rotation, some of those pieces with regards to I'm blanking out on there.
We're updating the signage.
The signage, the ice time, some of those things that had $1 figures to them. We addressed probably 85% of that report just through our budget for the current year. The second piece that then we had to look at was what are the things that are going to be out there for that. So like gymnastics, that's one that I don't have a space for. It'll be again a piece we look at when we expand our locations with the middle school campus. I know, Brian, you have that on your radar and have 2 or 3 options that we're looking at. The pieces with the signage and in the gymnasium. That'll be a piece that we'll continue to work on. But the piece that Brian's talking about is there was a large part of that, which was with regards to booster club funding. Because Title IX also incorporates anything that we spend as a district and any dollars that are either donated or fundraised for. So that's a piece that we've had to kind of engage on. So at the end of this month, I think on the 25th of January, we've put together a meeting that we've invited in a representative from all of the booster clubs and the head coach. So I think Rebecca and I were just talking yesterday, we're going to send out a reminder for that meeting on Monday. Then another one the following Monday, and then that meeting will take place on the 25th. That meeting, I think, is going to have a few different pieces to it. One is just to, I think we have to thank all of our booster clubs for all the work they do. I don't want this to be a negative, like you did something wrong, because I think it's just a matter of where we are as a district and as a community that we just have to come together and understand what these pieces are. So one is an appreciation of the work they do. The second part is to talk about what that report actually said. What is Title IX? It's an education component. What is Title IX? What is it not? Why did we do the report? What was the outcome of the report? What have we addressed already? And then why are we in the room talking? So I think it's going to be developing that why. The third part, I think, is I'm going to talk about what are some options that we may have. And then I also want to do some engagement with them, which we still have to plan out how we're going to do this. But I want to get their feedback on what ideas they have. I know just from talking to Aaron and talking to others, there's some that are already kind of having these conversations and have things that they have in mind that might address that. I've kind of encouraged the booster clubs through at least my last communication with them is don't change anything. Let's talk first so we kind of can then know what our next steps are. But we want to gather some input, some ideas as far as what that might look like. And then I see that being kind of a subsequent, probably another, at least probably 2 more meetings after that over the course of this second semester of the school year, then see kind of where some of those pieces go. There's some things that I think are going to be pieces we're just going to have to tell them we need them to look at. I mean, when we have booster clubs that are looked at, really support kids from the early elementary all the way through high school. Title IX really is focused in on what's happening at our programs. So if you're having a youth program that's a developmental program, those dollars, I need to have them separate from what we're doing like at the high school. So those are some things that came out of our report we've talked about. So some of the pieces are just an accounting feature and how we kind of account for that. The second piece is looking at ways that we can be more transparent with regards to the dollars that are spent, because we're going to have to track some of that to have an understanding of how we sit with regards to compliance. And then the other piece is that, and we've already talked to some of the clubs that have come and spoke to us about their next levels of facility enhancements, that anything we do there has to now have the Title IX lens to it to see if we do this, is there anything else that precipitates us doing? So having that conversation. And then the third part of the meeting that I said, the last part of the meeting I see is there's just some things as I have everybody together, I think it's just a good time for them to hear from me, kind of what are some of the things that we just have to make sure that they're aware of, as far as just some of the protocols and processes with regards to booster clubs and working as a district. So that's kind of what I see that first meeting as. It's probably a couple hours, and then we'll schedule a subsequent one from there. And then hopefully by our goal would be by the end of the school year to at least have kind of the first iteration of kind of being able to move in the right direction with kind of what some of the ideas that they come out with. So that's what my plan is, at least. So a little bit of it is a lot of information, gather some input. I don't have an end solution that I'm looking for on that meeting, but more to engage them and let them know it's going to be a collaborative process to find our way to the end. So,
can you give a update to the full board on those meetings and just how they
Sure,
went and what was
absolutely.
presented to them at
Absolutely,
the next full board?
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. Is there anything that any of you would like me to add to that? That's kind of what my plan is, at least. Is there anything that you've had as a thought to that would be helpful, or any insight? I mean, you've all worked on different booster boards and with the clubs. Are there specific things that would be helpful to make sure that we incorporate into that conversation?
I think, I mean, we've been talking about it for several years and I don't know where this falls into place, but. It sounds like this will occur, but working on kind of standardizing best practices amongst all the booster clubs so that. You know, we're not reinventing the wheel every time and that there's some, you know, more guidance like through a handbook or something that shows. What the best practices are, what, you know, kind of coordinate efforts.
Yep.
It sounds like that's gonna happen anyway with the. Talking points
I think
that
so.
you laid out,
So
so.
thanks. I mean, it's definitely being geared as a Title IX meeting. But while I have everybody,
Yeah.
I want to also talk about some of the other things, because we have things that we just have to make sure, and Aaron, you deal with these, is making sure that we understand that. Like advertising with kids is problematic from a WIA standpoint. And just making sure that we ended that, and you address that occasionally with different clubs as they come up, but just making sure that they have understandings of kind of what those WIA things are. What policies do we have in place? Because we have some with regards to kind of what we have and what our expectations of booster clubs and working with coaches and all of those different pieces. And then also wanting to really talk about, and this is probably the piece that we're going to have, that's probably the most challenging one, is trying to get a good understanding and a good plan on how do we kind of work together financially with transparency financially, because we're going to have to know what some of those expenditures are. So that we don't find ourselves into a position or them that really puts us in jeopardy on Title IX. So that's kind of what that's what I see. But we're going to think that meeting is going to be at the high school and in the commons in the cave. And I'd like to try to put some process to it where they can have some time to kind of work in small groups, brainstorm some ideas, and then share some of those items back out. And then we can kind of process through them, bring them back, toss some of those ideas out there, and then see kind of where those pieces lie. That's the idea.
Aaron, I know you would be working with some on bylaws and stuff, but most of them have something and we're working on it.
I would say the majority have bylaws. We still have some of our smaller groups, smaller sports that are without.
And that fits into exactly what this is. It's kind of all of that piece that's all going to help us to be a little tighter on some of those pieces.
Any further questions? All right, when do you think we would get the next update for winter sports? What month was that falling?
I would say right around spring break. That's when we start wrapping up with winter sports.
All right. So I think we'll just hold off on the next meeting until,
So it's good.
unless something pops up before that.
We'll do that right before, right after spring break.
All right, I guess we're ready to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.